Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready to take a bite out of the competition? Are you looking for ideas to make your business better? Welcome to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet,
sponsored by Apple Capital Group.
At the core of every successful business, you'll find people making a difference. And with each episode of the Core Business Show, we talk with those people, examine those ideas, and explore the strategies that make them special. Now, the host of the Core Business Show, Tim Jacquet.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host. Today we're going to talk about Bill Deane's book called Smooth Criminal, One Man's America, Crime Wave. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can join us by putting a question in the chat room, or you can email us, or you can give us a call at 347-324-3460. Bill, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Tim.
I guess to begin with, our audience love personal stories. So if you don't mind, tell us about yourself and how you came about writing this book.
Okay, well, I'll tell you that when I combine it with my meeting, Smooth Criminal. I uncovered the secret release of prisoners to carry out dangerous assignments overseas many years ago. I left CBS News as an assignment editor to research and write this full-time explosive story. And after 4 years this June, I was ready to publish Smooth Criminal, a one-man American crime wave. It highlights the damage one supervised criminal con artist can do to the American public. The CIA's extreme secrecy policy is the problem. Extreme secrecy. They don't tell anything to anybody, and that's what hurt a lot of people. All they had to do was to whisper in the ear, hey, watch out for this guy. They didn't even have to call him a con artist. They didn't have to say that they released him from prison, anything. And as I say, it's extreme secrecy. I wouldn't bother doing this story, just letting criminals out of jail to do dangerous assignments overseas. After all, maybe they have saved us from 2 more 9/11s. Who knows? They don't publish these things. But they send them overseas. They do the dangerous assignments, and they're promised, you get back to the United States, you may die trying to do this dangerous assignment that we're telling you. And they gladly say, I'll get out of jail to do it, because they can't stand, somebody with 120 IQ cannot stand that nonsense and the games that go on in prison. And I certainly wouldn't do it, but if I had been in jail and I had 30 more years to go, and I think I would say, yeah, I'll take a chance with my life. The feds deal to release prisoners so secret that local police, this is the problem, local police and even the FBI are told to stay out of the problem. They are not supposed to be involved. If somebody is calling the police and say, please help me, somebody has taken all of my money and sold my property from under me and drugged me. I know a woman that went to the FBI and said, please help, and they said, go home, he's no con artist. The local police, a local police officer was called because he was causing trouble in the neighborhood, and they refused to come, and an officer came on his own and said, I'm here totally on my own. He says, we have it higher than the chief of police of Tampa. Somebody some organization way much higher says, don't touch this case. Don't even make a note that you've been called. And so these guys were immune because they felt that the revelation of the program was that important, and that few people, the rationale that we've got 315 million people in America and we're trying to protect them, and so there is a residual downfall. We have to accept it. So what if a few people lose their jobs, lose their businesses, are drugged? We just have to accept that. I don't think in this particular case that they do. All they had to do was to whisper in the ear of some of these people that watch out for this guy. Don't trust him, the person that you're dealing with all this time. And they didn't do it. That's extreme secrecy.
What type of assignments the government normally have these individuals to do?
Well, we really don't know exactly. I know what Smooth Criminal did in Cuba. He was, in fact, I talked to him. I said, why should they trust you? You're a crook. And we were that close. And he said, because I don't know what I'm doing. He says, I have to go to such and such coordinates and count the number of generals coming out of this building. Well, what does that mean to me? He said, and it didn't. But then when it went back to Miami, in the second biggest CIA office in the world, they put those pieces together into a meaningful way. And also, some other ex-criminal was out there doing some of the same things. They didn't know it, and you better come back with the same information, or they know that you were enjoying yourself on Miami Beach and not going into the danger.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's an untold story, and you've seen this done fictionally so many times, but this is the true story. I came across it, and I felt obligated to report it because I met these people, and they have been hurt, and I really feel sorry for them. And they get conned, and they lose everything. I have a 90-year-old woman that's working as a maid. She's lost everything. She had $500,000, and this crook took it from her, and it took her motel in Miami from her, and it's enough to make you cry.
And the rationale is to put them to do dangerous work that not necessarily they want to use the military, or they only use some special operations for, and let them take the risk?
Well, special military and so forth would be too obvious. These guys are not obvious. That was another reason. Also, if somebody like this is let out of jail to do one of these things, in case they get killed, and many of them do, nobody knows. They don't have a record out here. They have a record in prison, and they just wipe it off, and nobody knows how many people have been killed like this. The people have to understand the difference between agents and operatives. These are not agents. The agents tell the operatives what to do, and some of them just carry out something for 10 minutes, or some of them are working full time as operatives for their life. It's their career. It depends.
Tell us about what type of people or what type of criminals they actually pull to do these assignments.
Well, that's another thing, and that's why they find them in prison and not out here that much. These guys are very cocky. They kind of forgot that they did something wrong and put them in jail in the first place. And so they remain confident and that they think that they can do anything and get away with anything. And so when they're told, you may die in this thing, they probably don't really believe it. And so that's why they make a good spy, probably more doing espionage than observing things. And that's why the program is very effective. They don't pick out your average criminal. They do this very secretively in prison. They tell the warden they want to look around and talk to some of the prisoners, and they very carefully and very secretively select maybe 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever they happen to need at that particular time. How extensive is the program? I think it's quite extensive, but I don't know for sure. But I know 3 of them, and I can establish what they did. I left CBS News to investigate this thing because this is nothing that you read. The CIA doesn't hand out news pieces of paper, press releases, or hold news conferences. And if you call them, a lot of ex-CIA agents have written books, and the policy with the CIA is, hey, don't tell them what we're doing now. That's all. You can report about what happened before. And of course, an ex-CIA agent can relate to that and understand that. When they were an agent, they didn't want anybody talking about what they were doing either. The need-to-know basis is what is very important with the CIA, but it's extreme secrecy that to the point where these victims people that are being victimized don't know that this con artist is anything but what he says he is. And that's the tragedy, and it will not spoil their program if they are considerate enough of people. But the extreme secrecy, so that the local police are told, if this person has trouble and is calling the police, you don't go. One time, the Miami police were called. Now, one of the victims went to local police headquarters and said, please help me. This guy is taking our business. He's gotten into our bank accounts, into our relatives' bank accounts. Please help us. And before he got back to his residence, the Miami police had called Smooth Criminal and said, this guy was down here. He was trying to ask our help. And I can understand they are told by the CIA, don't get involved. This is our baby. And so the cops who might want to help are told that they can't do it. I had a cop that a detective that just couldn't stand it, and he went and he begged the Fed, and they told him absolutely not. This is extreme secrecy, and they ought to be. And I understand why it's extreme secrecy. It's just a problem. You got this information, a little information here, a little information there, and then you can put it together in some kind of significance. But I just cannot believe that these innocent people have any information, or the fact that they're being conned by one of these guys that should have really been put back in jail, and they are not supervised. It is so secretive that the feds themselves don't want to be standing there and saying, you better behave or we're going to throw you back in jail. They don't even want to do that. And so it's not the secrecy, it's the secrecy to the extreme that has caused so much pain and agony of the American population.
So are they getting the results they're looking for? I just really hate to say that really make this whole puzzle worth it.
What do you mean?
Well, is it over national security?
Are
they getting the results?
They don't, as I say, they don't hold news conferences, but I know that the program continues because it's very effective. They find them in prisons, probably where they would have a difficult time finding people out here. And also, if something happened to that person, you would know about the program because that person would be missing. When you're in prison like this, you can become a non-entity. And so it's very effective in that way. It's also very effective that they find 0.1% of these ideal people who are cocky and who can get their way around in foreign countries. My smooth criminal he said in his own words to me, he says in 2 months he was really brilliant. In 2 months they turned me into a Cuban with Cuban. I knew Cuban history. I knew I spoke with a Cuban accent, Spanish with a Cuban accent, and he says in 2 months I was a Cuban. He says, and when I went down there, I fit in perfectly. Wow. The reason they, at that particular time, and I don't know what they're doing over in Iran or anything else, and I don't really care to try to find out and expose, but these guys went down there and they had to have the feds had to have boots on the ground, because in the 60s the satellites were up there, but they just didn't sit there. Now you can have a satellite and move it over a country and watch people go in a doorway or come out. That wasn't the case then. They had U-2s, but U-2s were going 600 miles an hour over Cuba, and they didn't get the pictures that they needed. So that's why they had these guys flying little Cessnas and Piper Cubs down there. If somebody wants to look this up and find out, to get some evidence on what I'm talking about, you can punch up on your computer the Miami Herald, October 11th, 1980. It says, jury can't decide if he was a patriot or an airplane hijacker. The information and the MO about how they operated at that time is in that story. That's exactly what Healy had told me years before. And another one, you can't believe this, that they are so secretive, the feds are, that they don't even tell the Justice Department that when Healy, my smooth criminal, was caught, we had a very energetic young Justice Department attorney who was being turned down, and Healy, the case was being dismissed by a judge who was in on it. He was the only one in on it, and this energetic Justice Department attorney took this thing all the way to the United States Supreme Court. They didn't even tell the Justice Department, hey, lay off this guy, we know him, or something. They didn't even have to say anything more than that. And the United States Supreme Court ordered a full-time, an actual trial under the Air Piracy Act, and he was prosecuted, but there was also a little clause in there after the guilty verdict came back. It said, unless excused earlier by the warden. Well, that day, they never got to see the warden. They were out again. And this is extreme secrecy that for 3.5 years, the Justice Department fought this case. There's another one that they picked up a guy. His name, you can look this up, is Luis Posada Corrales, Carriles. You've heard of him?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, he's the number one most wanted person in Cuba. He, under testimony in El Paso, Texas, 2 years ago, said, yeah, I killed this person. The CIA told me I killed that person. The only thing that he just cannot say or admit to was that he blew up the Cuban airliner that killed 73 athletes from Venezuela. I guess it was just too horrifying, but there are 2 witnesses that said that he was planning it. So he just can't probably say it. But there are billboards down in Cuba. They don't advertise cigarettes or soap. They advertise for Posada. They want Posada. If we ever regain our relation with Cuba, they're going to want this guy as a stipulation. They're going to say, we want to try him down here for what he did to our country. But we're talking about stuff that happened 50 years ago, and the Justice Department is spending time with it. And because the CIA refuses to testify, you and I can if we are told to testify, we have to take the stand at least. And the CIA just sat there with this trial over in El Paso, Texas, 1.5 years ago. And then when it was time for his attorney, Posada's attorney, to say, you got to come up and you got to refute what he says. He says he was working for the CIA. He killed all these people because you told him to. What do you say? And the CIA is above the law. They really are. They're the invisible government. And they said, we're not going to testify. And you and I can't do that. And that was the end of the trial. I don't know why the Justice Department wastes time doing these cases. Here's a case that's 50 years old, and this is just a few months ago that he was exonerated. I would hope that they would have more productive things to do than to exercise this. I mean, for 3.5 years they fought to get this case in the smooth criminal case going in Miami, and when they did, they got a guilty verdict. The judge said he could have put him in the electric chair, but the judge was in on it, and he said this is the greatest miscarriage of justice since a poor, starving man in the Middle Ages reached for a loaf of bread and they killed him. The judge, it was like a cheerleader on the bench trying to save these guys. He was in on it. He was a former Army officer. And it's the left hand of the government not knowing what the right hand is doing. And it's just a circus. Again, we go back to extreme secrecy. They ought to be able to judge when they have to go through, when they can say something and when they can't, but they just never say anything at all. You and I can be CIA agents and we can sit over a bar for 2 hours and talk about the ball games last night or something, but you will never tell me one thing, and then we can be the best friends. You will never tell me one thing of what you're doing, and I will never tell you. It's extreme secrecy. In that particular case, that's good, because if you got caught and you get tortured, you honestly don't know these other things. All you know is what you were doing and what kind of assignment. And that's good. So I'm not knocking it down. And I know that these guys have probably saved us from more terrorism in this country. And I'm only criticizing this extreme secrecy that has hurt human beings. And the rationale that we're taking care of the whole country and we can't be bothered. In this particular, there may be a real situation like that, but this is not the situation. These are innocent Americans who trusted somebody who said that he had direct White House connections, and one time he conned a woman out of $20,000. He says, I got 15 important people, agents coming down from Washington. We got to fix this motel up, so give me $20,000. She never saw the fix up and never saw the money again. He was a true con artist. I'm sorry.
Yeah, how can a person can protect themselves from running to these type of people.
Well,
and then lastly, would you like to leave us with the book?
Yeah, that's good. Smooth Criminal, One Man American Crime Wave, it's called. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. It's very easy to get. The important thing is that you can save yourself from these con artists. They all have the same pattern. And so all you have to know is, and if they don't get you interested and get you involved and start getting your money, you don't. You can tell them. You can tell them off in the beginning, and you can say, "I'm not interested in your proposal," and they'll go away. The reason they'll go away is that they know that there are about 30% of the population that will be fooled by them, and so why spend all your time trying to convince somebody when they can find somebody that's readily available? If you have a particular problem like a divorce or something like that, or you're in need of money or something, you become vulnerable. But it's about 30%. Around the world, it amazes me that you can go to outer Mongolia, and according to psychologists, it's 4%. 4% all over the world are these con artists. And I'm not sure why that's in the genes that way, but it is. So you can't get away from them wherever you go. Now, you will meet this person, and he will be so interested in you, and he'll be such a confident talker. You say, here's somebody that really knows what's going on, and they're interested in me. And it's quite a turn on for somebody that may be lonely, or in one of these particular cases, there was a very patriotic person, and the con artist came on, and it was a very patriotic person himself, and so they could relate. I mean, you can be into stamp collecting, and they'll go down there and study about stamps, and it's a very a hobby that not many people are involved in. So here's a guy that's involved in this, and also women. About 25% are con artists are women, and so here's a guy that's really interested in my stamp collecting. And they'll do that. They have this enormous ego. They will listen attentively, and how wonderful that somebody so smart is interested in me, you'll say. And they act and move fast. And this is sort of like Pinocchio, where you have a great time in the beginning, and then they slam you into a factory where you're working 20 hours a day. The good times end after a few weeks, and after a while they move instantly from one end of the continuum to the other, and you then are feeling, why is he so mad at me now? He was always so good, and he's good sometimes, and it's all my fault, and I'm trying to please him. In other words, he's weakening you and your thinking. You become like you're blaming yourself for his attitude. Well, he's doing that on purpose. And you ask questions, and there are gaps. So that's one thing. Sometimes they're such great talkers, but they slip because they're talking all the time. And be a good listener and see if there's an inconsistency about where they were or something. They cover their tracks by getting your close friends and your relatives into a war among themselves. They repeat some gossip or something, and so you got your whole family fighting against each other instead of fighting him. And one thing that they have that the animal world and our is that we kind of trust people that look you in the eye, and they have that technique. They can lie and look you right in the eye, but we sort of feel that, geez, it might be true, but this guy, he's looking me right in the eye. Well, they know how to do that. And they are moving so fast at this time, and you've got to have the money not next week. You've got to have it now, and that puts you under pressure. And they can tell you a great story why they have to have it now and why they can't wait. And then they throw guilt on you. After all I've done for you, and you're acting this way, and you're hesitating, and we're doing this great cause for the country, whatever they've invented. And then there's quite often a sexual attraction. Those are the 10 ways.
Well, Bill, I really appreciate you coming to the program. And again, we can get your book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, that's right. If it's not there, they can order it at any store in the world. They go in and they will. It's Smooth Criminal. You got to say Smooth Criminal, a one-man American crime waiver. Smooth Criminal, Bill Deane, Deane. Otherwise, you'll get Michael Jackson's song "Smooth Criminal," which really doesn't relate at all.
Again, I appreciate it. And you have a website address if they want to check some information?
Oh, yeah. You can get the book's website simply by smoothcriminal.info, not .com, .info, and that's an easy way to get the book. And then I blog every day, and that's on ourmissingnews.com. I try to go in depth, like if there's an airplane crash, I try to find out why so it doesn't happen again.
Great. Thank you for coming on the program.
Well, thank you, Tim. Thanks for the question.
Great. Thank you. Take care of him. I appreciate you coming on the program. Take care. Bye. Again, it's been another production of the Core Business Show. Thank you all for listening. You can download this episode on iTunes and Blog Talk Radio. Everybody, have a great day. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet. For a free quote on equipment leasing and financing, visit our website, applecapitalgroup.com. That's applecapitalgroup.com. And fill out the information to receive your free quote. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. And remember, you can always get to the Core via iTunes. You'll find all our previous episodes there. Thanks again for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet.